Hello and welcome to Work Like a Girl, where we feature interesting women doing interesting work. Today I'm going to be speaking with Lisa Bridges, who's a wildlife biologist. Lisa has a Bachelor of Science in Biological Science, as well as a Master of Science in Wildlife Biology, and she works currently as a reclamation specialist in biodiversity. So Lisa, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us exactly, what does a wildlife biologist do?
Well, a wildlife biologist, for the most part, is trying to reduce the impacts of development on wildlife populations. So I do that through regulatory submissions, through reviewing mitigation and different things that we can do to help animals when you're developing industrial developments. And we also do that through designing reclamation landscapes for wildlife. So for example, we put in extra wetlands for frogs or try and recreate lichen for caribou.
And what would a typical day or a typical week, if there is such a thing,
Yeah.
look like in your work?
Typically, I collaborate with a lot of different groups of people, with engineers and researchers, project managers, First Nations groups. The large part of my job is actually communicating science to people in ways that they can understand. And I think that's really important, especially, and actually I think that's something that women can do, possibly even a bit better than men, is communicating in a language that anybody can understand, the kind of complicated scientific principles.
We're in the lobby of an oil and gas company. Would wildlife biologists typically work for oil and gas, or are there other industries that they would work in as well?
There's lots of different industries. I've worked for government, I've worked for consulting, I'm in oil and gas now. You can work in forestry, you can work in like offshore, doing, basically any kind of government agency will have wildlife biologists working for it.
Lisa, what surprises people the most when you tell them that you work as a wildlife biologist?
Well, generally, most people have never heard of wildlife biologists having jobs. So
okay.
People generally get surprised that I study wildlife for a living and that I get paid to do it. People love wildlife, so they get excited. They ask what I study, what my favorite animals are, and what the sort of most important issues are. Because there's a lot of people that are quite concerned about wildlife populations in many different ways. So, yeah, that's actually the biggest thing, is just people are surprised, not so much because I'm a woman studying wildlife, but more just that I'm studying wildlife at all.
All right. So what is your favorite animal?
Well, I study caribou for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah, and I generally, for the most part, try and stick towards caribou or like moose and ungulates.
Okay.
Basically my favorite.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So what's the best part of your profession, and what would you change if you could?
I'd say the best part is I do feel like I make a difference every day. I feel like decisions I make and convincing that I do of people around me actually makes a measurable and tangible difference in the world to wildlife populations. And I think that not every profession allows you to feel accomplished, and that's for the most part what I like the most about what I do, is I can see the results, and I can see populations increasing, I can see animals not getting hurt and that sort of thing.
That is so good. There are a lot of authors that talk about needing to have a purpose in your work, or needing to know that you make a difference. Patrick Lencioni and John Izzo and a lot of authors talk about purpose and making a difference, and it sounds like in your work you certainly have that ability. That is fantastic.
Yeah.
So why do you think there aren't as many women in your profession as there could be?
There are a lot of women in wildlife in terms of studying birds. That birds are quite popular. They're kind of a feminine animal. It's easy to go out and look at birds anytime to learn bird species and that sort of thing. The large mammals, which I've specialized in, are much more difficult. They're more expensive to study. It's kind of a very masculine profession. It can be really physically demanding, doing snow tracking in 2 meters of snow in the Arctic in the middle of nowhere. It's not really, it's not very conducive to, being warm and cozy for the most part. A lot of work is in the winter.
Okay.
And it can be basically physically demanding, but also very remote. And I think the combination of those two things can be a bit of a deterrent. Plus with wildlife, and historically it's been very, very male dominated, especially large mammals. And there has been more lately, but there hasn't historically been a lot of female role models that are wildlife biologists that study. I can probably count on one hand, maybe 2 or 3 women that are of the generation before me that have actually studied large mammals. So, yeah.
So if we were giving advice to a teacher or to a career counselor, what would you say to them in order to encourage more young girls or women to pursue this as a career?
I think the best thing about what I do, and what I think that, at least for me, what drives me, is that it's different every day. You get to go see different parts of the world, different ecosystems, different animals. You get to learn a lot from doing that, and just being flexible and doing lots of different things, from being in the field to doing computer work in the office to, giving lectures at conferences and that sort of thing. The variety is really huge. So if you like variety, this is definitely a good job for you. If you like to be in one spot doing the same thing all the time, this is not the career for you. Yeah. But definitely having the flexibility and travel, because I travel a lot for my job. I always have. And that's actually one of the drivers that I have that keeps me interested in it, because I always get to go to new places and see new things.
So lots of variety and the ability to make a difference and to see your results. You were saying about increases in population and working in consultation with the different groups. That's fantastic. Yeah. So what advice would you give to 15-year-old Lisa?
I would say be confident in your own knowledge. That is the biggest thing. It took me a really long time, probably until I was about maybe 35, before I recognized that I knew things that other people didn't know, and that I could help people in ways that other people couldn't help them. I think it's really easy to sort of assume that your knowledge is something common sense, especially when it comes to something like wildlife, where it is logical, it is counting, and you see these animals kind of everywhere, and you just think, well, everybody knows this stuff, and it's not true. Nobody knows everything that you know.
That's true.
And so you need to have the confidence to sort of go for your dreams, and don't be afraid to speak up and that sort of thing, because I think we sometimes think, oh, I shouldn't say anything, I might be wrong, or take a risk and be confident in what you know.
That is excellent advice, not just for 15-year-old Lisa, but I think that's great advice for everybody. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
I've got one more question for you. So if somebody were interested now in pursuing wildlife biology or finding out more about that, are there any schools they could be talking to, or where could they find more information about that as a career option?
There's a lot of schools across Canada that wildlife is a staple. University of Alberta is a good place. I went to Trent University, which for me was great because it's a really small school. There's only about 2,000 to 4,000 students. You get to know all your professors. You get to learn so much about lots of different species. And McGill University is another good one. UBC, UVic.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you so much. Lisa, it's been fantastic to talk to you. Thank you. We've been talking to Lisa Bridges, and this has been Work Like a Girl, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.